Hi, Professor Beliso. Can you tell us your name
My name is Professor Brannon Beliso.
and where are you from?
I'm from San Francisco, born and raised.
Amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about your martial arts background?
I started martial arts officially back in 1967, but it was really more a little bit earlier. They just didn't have uniforms for kids back then. So my dad said I officially started in 1967 because that's when they actually started making uniforms for small children. So I started in 67.
So, with the success of your fighting career back in the early days, you fought all around the country for many years, and your father actually owned the school. Can you tell us about that school?
Yeah, my dad's school is Beliso Karate School. It started out in the basement of our flat on 15th and Cap Street. But then eventually my grandmother helped my father buy a building. And so he moved it into what was called Army Street at the time. And it was a 3-story building. So above he had tenants, we lived in the middle. Then on the bottom half, which was an old auto shop, he converted that into a karate studio. And that's where he's been for the better part of 50 years. Now, I didn't fight all over the country. I only fought in the state. Because back then, just much like now, we couldn't afford to travel. We were pretty poor. So we were able to travel around the state. And I was number one in the state. But we didn't really travel around the country. Most people didn't back then. They only fought in their regions because tournaments weren't as big nationally as they are now.
Awesome. And so you were trained by some of Kempo's best. Can you tell us some of your instructors?
Through the years, my number one instructor, of course, is my father, Professor Lenny Beliso. But I've studied with Grandmaster Rick Alamany, who's a very well-known fighter. He fought and beat Chuck Norris. There's also great Grandmaster Ralph Castro, who actually trained with Bruce Lee and trained with Ed Parker under William Chow. I took Kung Fu for 3 years under a gentleman named Kwak Siu. I studied the Northern Southern Siulam system. I've done some of the Filipino fighting arts for years, so I've taken seminars with everybody from Bill Wallace to Remy Priestis. I just took one recently with Dan Inosantos. So martial arts in me has been a love affair that's gone on a lifetime. I kickbox, I boxed, I did 4 years of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but I would never call myself a Jiu-Jitsu man because I don't practice that consistently.
So Ralph Castro is super famous in the Kempo industry. Everybody knows who he is.
Yes.
Can you tell us what's it like training with somebody of that caliber? Can you give us kind of how that went?
I didn't get to study with him until I was about 30 plus years into my Kempo career, my martial arts career, period. So during that time, we studied privately. And it was brilliant because I don't believe I would have had the eye to recognize all the little nuances that he does with the movements. I mean, Kenpo, there's so many layers like any martial arts. But especially with Kenpo, to be able to have that experience of 30 plus years when I was learning from him at that point in my life, I mean, I got so much out of it. If you're a year 1, year 2 student, you would never be able to see the intricacies of the moves that he taught. And he was one of the only people that Bruce Lee said he couldn't block his back fist. So, I mean, Great Grandmaster Ralph Castro was more than a legacy. It's an iconic, his relationship with Bruce Lee, and it's documented. It's well documented.
And what was his training regimen like when he was training you when you were with Ralph Castro?
Well, again, because I had so many years under my belt, it wasn't more just the physicality, but it really was understanding the mind-body-spirit relationship as in any Eastern art, right? It's about the mind, the body, and the spirit. So we would actually pray. He was a very God-centered man, and as I am as well. So we would actually pray at the end of our classes, and that was different. I'd never done that with anybody. But he saw that I had a lot of experience, so he didn't hold back. He would move fast, he would move quick, he would expect me to get it right away, and if I didn't, then he would be on to the next thing with me standing there trying to figure out the first thing. And I enjoyed that about him, because he always pushed me harder than, he probably would have pushed anyone else, because he knew with 30 plus years of martial arts training already, especially in Kenpo, that I would be able to embrace it and appreciate, that type of training.
And Professor, can you tell us about what was the training regimen like with your father? What was it like within that 30 years? Would you say it was strict? You fought a lot, and you're very well known in the point karate world, especially in California. A lot of people know who you were. You were a decorated athlete back in those days. Can you tell us what your training regimen was to prepare for fights, or what your basic training regimen was for your dojo at the time, growing up?
With my father, because he was my father, and back then nobody was making money in the martial arts. We trained purely for the art, purely for the love. And my father made no qualms about that. I trained 6 days a week, 4 hours a day, tournaments every other weekend. And let's say I was fighting the 8 to 10-year-old division. Well, in our school, I trained and fought with nothing but kids that were 13 to 14 years old. So he knew if I could hang with the 13 and 14-year-olds, when I went into a division with 8 to 10-year-olds, kids my age, I would walk right through them. And I did. I walked right through them. Because the way we trained in my father's school was like a tournament, but you're in a tournament with 13 and 14-year-olds. And I remember one Friday night, it was Friday night about 9:30 at night, and I said to my papa, I said, Dad, how much more can we possibly train? The tournament's tomorrow, it's 9:30 at night. And he looked at me like he always did, and he said, you know what? Right now, when you're not training, somebody else is. And that's the guy that's going to beat you tomorrow. And I think that Friday night we trained till like 11:30 just to teach me that lesson. But I think the most valuable thing I got out of that was I really learned to appreciate the work ethic that goes into going from good to great. I was the best there was in my age division in California. Nobody could beat me. And my father made sure of that. And he was very strict. I remember winning internationals. Right? I won in 72, 73, and I think 74, something like that. I won first place. But because I didn't follow his set of instructions in the ring, and I made adjustments. And we always had those kind of conversations because he had a very clear action plan. He was the coach. He had a game plan. You went in there and you followed it. And many times I didn't, because I'm in the ring in real time making adjustments to beat this opponent. And that was a talent that I had. I have the ability to adapt in a ring and adjust instantly on the fly. Because you go in there with a perfect game plan, it doesn't always work out. And sometimes it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. You're forcing it. But I really love that interaction with another opponent to be able to be the ebb to his flow and make that adjustment. Long story short, I won first place. Ed Parker handed it to me.
Wow.
I walked to the edge, I walked off the stage, handed it to my father. He said, push-ups. And I must have done 100 push-ups with him standing over me.
What was it like meeting Ed Parker? Did you ever train with him or anything like that?
No, I never trained with him.
But was there any dialogue between the two of you?
Absolutely. He was a gentle giant. He was a tough man. Again, everybody was tough back then, but you had to be. It was just that era, like that movie that Elvis did, the Gladiators, the American Gladiators. I don't remember the name of the movie that had...
The New Gladiators or the karate.
Sensei Benny, Tom Kelly, Ron Marchini, John Natividad. All these guys were in that. That's how we fought back then. We never wore a groin cup. We never wore a mouthpiece. The jewelry safety gear didn't come till the 80s. We took medical tape and we taped up our hand. And there was no doctor in sight. So you got busted up all the time. But I do remember at internationals, and there's a picture somewhere in the universe, my dad might have it, walking on that stage and getting that trophy handed to me by Ed Parker. And he always had that kind of pidgin English, because he was from Hawaii. And I didn't know at the time, being a kid, what that was. I just always thought, that's really strange the way this man talks. So being a kid, I didn't really appreciate Ed Parker for who he was, because I was a kid.
So there's actually a film that was documented on YouTube, and it's basically your family's life. They're eating on the dinner table. You guys are actually arguing, and it's the Beliso karate family, essentially.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that film was about?
I was about 13, maybe 14 years old, and they were looking for people. The series was called Rebop. It was a PBS series on Channel 9, and they were looking for kids that had very unique lives. So they took a prodigy is the correct word, who played violin. And they took me because of my martial arts talent. And so they centered, it was supposed to be martial arts, but of course they wanted that background. So they went into our home life, my best friend, martial arts training, my father's philosophy. He said, martial arts is 60% mental and 40% physical. And it's true. It's true. Some of the greatest athletes, someone like a Joe Montana, who may not physically be your prototype quarterback, that guy won what, 4 Super Bowls? Because he had the mental capacity. And that's the big thing I think that the martial arts has really given me through my whole lifetime, is the mental capacity to handle adversity, to process stress, and to come out on the other side victorious.
One of the things when I'm watching that film, it shows a different time and a different era, especially of you and your family, in the dojo, and it's showing, your sister, God bless her, and a bunch of other parts of your family that are very intimate to your life. What were you thinking when that film was being made?
And at the time, I didn't think anything. I was just a kid. Mind you, I'm just a kid, living life. Growing up in the ghetto, growing up with a single parent, latchkey kid. I could cook a full meal at 8 years old. All of us knew how to do wash. My mom left at a very early part of our lives, and my father raised us, to the best that he could. So at the time of that film, to me, it was like almost surreal. Because I'm just some kid running around 15th and Cap Street, 18th and Lexington. We're living in the ghetto. And at the time, San Francisco wasn't gentrified. There was no money in San Francisco. It was no different than Detroit or any other, urban city back in the 70s. So at the time, I didn't think much of it. But when I look back at it now, my grandmother's in it. She's passed away. My sister Lisa's in it. She passed away. 2 of my uncles are in it. They're both gone. My aunt's in it. She's gone. So I look at that film with a deep sense of nostalgia and going, wow, that was really an amazing time. Because family was there and we were intimate, on a family level. And no matter what the cards were dealt us, the amazing thing about that was we found a way in all our dysfunction to be a state champion. In all our dysfunction to have this very well-known martial arts school. In all our dysfunction to still be able to stick together as a family. That was powerful.
So you had a singing career,
yes,
and you are pretty famous in the Philippines. Your song was number 1. Can you tell us about why you kind of took a break from the martial arts for a while to do your acting and your singing? You have a lot of videos on YouTube of you singing with a feather on the ear, and you look like a rock star. That's what you were.
I was.
So can you tell us about that experience that you did for a few years?
When you ask me that question, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I was never good at anything. I wasn't born a great martial artist. I became a great martial artist through commitment, hard training, perseverance. Same thing with music. I was not a great singer. I was not a great musician. But I knew my voice was a muscle. And if it was trained properly, I could become a great singer. I was a self-taught musician. So when I finally hit that deal and I had arrived, into that part of my life and that career, I recognized it was the second time. It was like the second coming at the martial arts, then I had the music. And it really taught me that, wow, I could do and be pretty much anything I choose to be if I recognize I don't need to be good to begin with, right? I wasn't given this God-given natural talent, but with dedication, with perseverance and determination that you can pretty much achieve anything. And that's what I think I got the most out of my music career. Other than, 3 top 10 hits, a number 1 album, and all the other stuff that came along with being a pop star.
So what's interesting, you talk about this in your book. What was the book again? Can you tell us?
Live, Learn, Grow, Lessons of a Reluctant Tiger. Yeah,
and you can order that on Amazon.
Amazon,
right?
It's available in book form. You can actually listen to it. I narrated the book, so you can listen to it at Audible. And what's unique about that was we recorded it in the studio where George Lucas and Steven Spielberg conceptualized Jurassic Park and Star Wars.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was, right? I'm sitting in the studio going, did he sit in this chair? And I did an interview in the theater where THX was born.
Wow.
So that was powerful. So it's on Audible as well as Kindle.
So you talk about in your book, you're very open about it. In your book, you talk about, how you had women, you had this rock star life, and then you went broke.
Yep.
So, you talk about that, and then what ended up happening was you ended up opening up a martial arts school. Can you talk about what that experience was when you first opened the...
Yeah, so let's just segue. So I made all this money in the Philippines. I came back. I was living in a room in my sister's home, $500 a month for this room. And I blew through all this money in 6 months. All the money I'd made, I blew through because I was still playing rock star. But instead of being in the Philippines, I was here. And I knew the career was over. I didn't want to continue it. I was offered a 3-album, 5-year deal. Now remind you, I was on the road 10 months out of the year, 2 months home. And I exhausted this album over 3 years. So the thought of doing 3 more albums in 5 years, that was insane. So when I came back here, I knew I wanted to end it. I was done with music, but I was still trying to live that rock star life. So I blew through all that money, and then I'd seen Tybo one night. Tybo. And I went, wow, because I used to be a DJ, before I signed my record deal. I'm a musician, I'm an entertainer, it's martial arts, it's everything. And it's fitness, everything I love. So I came out with my own Tybo tape, and that's still available at Amazon. It's called One, the Next Level in Cardio Kickboxing, available on VHS, right? So at the time I was teaching at 3 or 4 health clubs, my father's school, Great Grandmaster Castro's school, and I was in a partnership with my instructor now, Rick Alamany. And then we had a falling out. I'll just leave it at that at the time. And so 4 friends, 4 or 5, one at 10,000, one at 5, one at 3, one at 2, they came up with $40,000. And within 2 months of me leaving Alamany's, I opened my own school.
But didn't you say that it actually failed? The one in fitness is what you said?
No. The first one I had, I was 19 years old.
Oh, okay.
I was living down in LA in Southern California, and it was called School of Chinese Kenpo Karate. It was, and it lasted 9 months because I was always training for a fight or a tournament, because everybody who came through the door was just another sparring partner.
Right.
And you can't grow a business that way. So that was actually my first school, and that was done in 9 months. But the second one was called One Health and Fitness. I envisioned this East meets West gym. We had Qigong, we had Aikido, we had Tai Chi, we had Kenpo, we even had an esthetician in the back doing facials and massages. But I was just doing that to make rent. The minute the clarity hit me was maybe about the 1,000th time somebody called the school and said, "Do you have showers and towels?" I'm going, "No, we're not a gym, we're a martial arts school." But I guess being called One Health and Fitness, duh. I mean, wouldn't you think it was a health club? Mm-hmm. Right. So I said, that's it. I know what's wrong here. I changed the name to One Martial Arts. We got rid of everything. Because by then I could make rent. We got rid of the esthetician, we got rid of the Aikido, the Tai Chi, the Qigong. I even think we had ballroom dancers there during the day. We had just so much stuff going because we were trying to make rent. But now that we saw the light of day and my vision was clear, I got rid of all those things, honed in on martial arts, and it took off.
So let's talk about your success with One Martial Arts. I mean, can you tell us why it's so successful? What makes it so different?
I think the first thing is to understand what my version of success is may not be your version of success, may not be his version of success or hers. I think I defined very clearly what I wanted. Now, having grown in the poor, I used to think $1 million was a lot of money. So I wanted $1 million school. That was it. So the first logic was, okay, 600 students times $150, $90,000 a month, times 12, there's your $1 million. So I wanted to create a school with 600 students. That was the mindset. But I didn't like the models that were out there. I remember going to my first real martial arts business seminar. I had 350 students at the time. And this guy stands up there and he says, "What do you see?" And he holds up his keys. I go, "I see keys, sir." He goes, No. What do you see? I see keys. He goes, no, what do you see? I said, I see keys. He says, no, you see a Porsche key ring. Here we go. So everything from there was sales, 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 sales scripts, sales, upgrades, upgrades, upgrades. And I'm sitting there like this, and I guess he saw my body language, that I was very disenchanted because that's not how I was running my business. And he looked at me and he said, sir, you, how many students do you have? I said, 350. He goes, and what upgrade programs do you have? What sales scripts do you use? You know, what's your enrollment fees and processes? I said, sir, we have none of those things. And I knew his game was way thrown off. And he said, you really must love what you do. And that's when I knew I was on the right track. And from the days of working in my grandma's restaurants, where she served everybody, right through my dad in his schools, where he served everybody, I knew that service was the new profit. And if anybody could serve really, really well, it would be better than any kind of sales script, better than any slick salesman, some program director that could close the deal. I knew that. I knew that at the time. So I made service my purpose, service the foundation of what I do, and it took off. And we took off. Yeah.
So your martial arts school is now one of the top grossing schools in the country.
I believe, yes.
Would you say that's amazing, right? Because you don't do any upgrades, you don't do any belt testing fees or any of that. What is the secret to that? What do you think?
You know, I mean, everything for me is a relationship, okay? A lot of schools out there will have a 90-day cancellation policy. Now, let's just talk about a relationship. If a girl is breaking up with you, do you think she's breaking up with you that day? No, she broke up with you months ago. She's just simply telling you that day. And how insane would it sound? I want to break up with you. Well, you can't. We have a 90-day breakup policy. So for the next 90 days, you have to continue dating me so I can refocus, recommit, and re-energize you to this relationship. It's insane. So what we recognize service is every day. I had a great Korean master come into my school and watch us for a couple of days. And then he said, sir, I want to talk to you. I said, yes, sir. He said, you know what I realized? You sell all the time. I said, I was offended at first. So what do you mean? I don't have sales script. I don't have program directors. We don't have upgrades. He says, no. You sell the minute you say hello when they walk in the door. You sell when they walk to the edge of the mat and you tie their belt. You sell when the music comes on and you run these amazing classes. It's the art of selling without selling.